I personally think on a short-term basis, gold found a bottom at 1680. I think silver found a bottom when it dropped down around 18. It had that one big sell-off.
Silver has recently taken a dive, but fought back to around the $20 range. Are you surprised silver hasn't taken off like we'd expect with the environment that we're in, Gary?
Well, both gold and silver have been depressed because of the exceptionally strong US dollar. The dollar has been strong because the Fed since March has begun a series of aggressive rate hikes. So as yields have risen on US debt instruments, because gold and silver are non-yielding assets, fixed income dollars tend to go into bonds, notes, things of that nature. And so a strong dollar has been what has held down the precious metals from moving higher.
So as you're basically saying, as the US dollar will it take a dive? Do you believe that's like your view sooner or later, then precious metals will have its rally?
You know, there's an old saying by Paul Volcker, trees do not grow to the sky, never have, never will. And he was referring to interest rates. It's all about what the Federal Reserve does as they try to combat inflation. And
Right.
they're in a quandary right now because effectively they've raised rates 4 times during the last 4 FOMC meetings for consecutively larger hikes, 25 basis points, 50, and the last 2 at 75. And the CPI latest number is at 9.1. So they've been raising rates and inflation continues to spiral higher. Then they go back and go, well, that's headline inflation. Let's look at core inflation. And core simply strips out energy, food, and housing costs. And they've acknowledged they can't control those things. The problem that the Fed is facing is that by raising interest rates, it is not going to have a dramatic impact on taking the level that we have of inflation down.
Mm-hmm.
And they're estimating right now that by the end of the year, we might be at 3.5 to 4%. Once we get anywhere above that price in terms of real interest rates, the United States is posed with a tremendous problem. Because at 3.5%, I believe it costs about $2 trillion per year to pay the interest on our national debt.
That's crazy.
So as you raise rates, the Fed knows that they can't keep them high for any length of time. That's absolutely unsustainable. And the real issue is, if you look back in history, the last times we've had double-digit inflation, and you look at how the Federal Reserve reacted to it, they always had the interest rates at or slightly above the level of inflation. The only thing that the Federal Reserve has effectively accomplished is they've put us into a recession,
Right.
because they haven't had any real impact at all on reducing inflation. And the problem is they know that they can't, because it's supply chain issues. You can't lessen demand on things like food and energy. People might switch from what meats or foods they buy, but they've got to eat. And transportation is a key and critical component of every industry. We're a fossil fuel-based world, global economic society. And with energy costs as high as they are, that has to unwind naturally before inflation comes down.
So, Gary, what do you believe they'll pivot like November, 3, 4 months? When do you predict that they'll take a pause on raising the interest rates?
Their rhetoric is that they will continue to raise rates until they get inflation to an acceptable target level. That's
Mm-hmm.
what they say. Now, what will they do? I believe that the next FOMC meeting, which is November,
Yep.
they'll probably raise it maybe by 0.5%. I don't think that they'll come in and raise it by a full percent. However, it's data dependent. And if we don't see any kind of real reduction in the CPI between now and then, it's going to force their hand to really have an aggressive rate hike, maybe another 75 basis points, maybe a full percentage rate hike.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that they're going to stop until they see data that suggests that it has at least stopped rising, that it's at a peak. Because if they can even show a small downtick or that it's peaked at a point, they can make the statement that, well, we're having an effect. The problem, of course, is their belief that they can do that with a soft landing. In other words, without affecting the economy. And it's an oxymoron, basically, to say that, because the only way that they address reducing inflation is to contract the economy. And when you contract the economy, there's no such thing as a soft landing.
Mm-hmm.
And then, as I said at the beginning, the real question is, if they do raise rates to where they need it to be to effectively control it,
Right.
you're talking about 5 or 6% interest rates. And that is unsustainable in terms of paying the national debt. And that will absolutely do more than put us in a recession.
So the market has always sensed, like recently, they've sensed that the Fed is reactionary. And do you believe it's too late for the Fed to rip the Band-Aid off? And has the market just sensed the uncertainty from them? What do you believe?
I believe it's worse than they're not reactionary. They are the opposite of proactive.
Mm-hmm.
They are flying by the seat of their pants, trying to figure out what to do as these numbers come out and show that all of their actions and their monetary tightening have had zero impact. And if anything, inflation continues to rise. So they're way behind the curve. That's an obvious. The thing is that the Federal Reserve by itself cannot control, cannot reduce inflation. It's a multi-level problem that needs to have a hands-on approach for more than just that agency. And there will come a point in time when that becomes an absolute truth that everybody accepts, and they're going to have to take a different approach.
Do you think Powell should have just retired when he had the chance? Left it on someone else's shoulder?
I don't know. I don't think there's enough money in the world you could pay me. One, I couldn't do his job, but
Yeah,
the man is in a tough position. He's a smart man,
right.
but he's not done what he set out to do in the way he set out to do it. He tries to be transparent on one hand, but then he takes 2 steps forward and 1 step backwards in terms of what his doctrine is, his intent. He's going to be transparent, and then they go back on that. So I think that he's in a unwinnable war, let's say, and he's literally hanging on by a thread to just hold the pieces together.
Right. Now, talking about our favorite subject, silver and precious metals, what's your short-term price prediction? Like, let's say now to 2023, the beginning of it, where do you see silver and gold going? Do you see it staying leveling off, or do you see us taking off as something pops off in the, let's say, the stock market or the bond market?
Right. Well, what we have to realize is that the dollar is at a 20-year high. Went up as high as 109 on the dollar index. It's back down to 106. Because we pair gold and silver against dollar, we sell it and we look at its value in terms of dollars.
Mm-hmm.
As the dollar gains value, it costs more money to buy that same amount of silver, especially if you're working with another currency. I personally think on a short-term basis, gold found a bottom at 1680. I think silver found a bottom when it dropped down around 18. It had that one big sell-off.
Yeah.
And then we had that huge push. We had what was this 7.5% daily gain, followed by almost a 3% gain over the last couple of days. Today, it's still sitting above $20. I'm looking at around $19.90 to $20 as effectively an area of support. Myself, I trade the precious metals markets for my clients in terms of giving them recommendations. But we also have a lot of our premium subscribers that are silver and gold accumulators. And so they use our service as a timing as to when to add to those positions. I can only tell you from my personal experience, I bought, and I'm a small time buyer, but I buy kilos, by the way. I
Nice.
don't like the, well, I don't like the premium on, on these things here. They're beautiful, but the premiums are way out of hand.
Is that an American Eagle?
It's a Libertia.
Oh, nice. Oh,
Okay,
beautiful.
but these are this is my mainstay, are these guys.
Yeah, those are really nice.
And so I bought a couple. I bought them at 18, and by the time they got shipped to me, I've received them actually the other day, and silver was already at $20. So you're not paying that much over spot. You have $3, $4 over spot on the kilos. I don't believe in numismatics, not because I don't think that they have true value. I think that there is too much room for creative pricing, let's call it that.
Right. Yeah.
And so an ounce of silver is an ounce of silver is an ounce of silver. And if it's $9.99, you're comparing apples to apples. What's happening though is the premium has gotten so great on some of the 1 ounce rounds that it's made it difficult for the average collector, or I call him an accumulator, who wants those hard assets. And my belief is that all investors at every point in their life, whether they're 20 or 100, should put a percentage of their overall investment portfolio into hard assets. I believe silver and gold are those hard assets to do it with. I've always been an advocate that realizes that once we went off of the gold standard, and that really began in 33, when the president mandated that all American citizens give up their gold, their silver coins, as well as gold certificates and silver certificate dollars for this new beautiful fiat currency. And so then we had gold sitting at $20. A year and a half later, he raised it to 33. And that's always been the standard. Gold is held and silver has held their value for thousands of years. Nixon and Bretton Woods, of course, before that, put the final coffin in the nail of the gold standard. And so now that we have currencies worldwide not backed by any hard asset, there's really only one direction that they can go in terms of real value, and that's down, because they're simply backed by the faith of the government. And regardless of how strongly you believe in that government to transact, they have the ability to print more dollars when needed and not be accountable to anyone. And so for that reason, I've always believed that gold and silver should be an integral component of everyone's portfolio.